Did you know that some of the most influential figures in the Byzantine Empire, from the 4th to the 15th century, were women who took vows of poverty and devotion? Did you know that these seemingly secluded women held immense wealth, shaped imperial politics, and ran sophisticated social welfare systems? Prepare to uncover the truly astonishing realities of Byzantine nuns. Number 10. The astonishing economic powerhouses of Byzantine convents. Byzantine convents were far from humble abodes of quiet contemplation. Many of them were powerful economic engines, rivaling and sometimes surpassing the wealth of aristocratic families, and even certain segments of the imperial court. These institutions controlled vast tracts of land, not just in the immediate vicinity of their monasteries, but often spread across different regions of the empire. This land was not just for subsistence, it was highly productive, supporting diverse agricultural enterprises. For instance, the monastery of the Theotokos Kekatomena in Constantinople, founded by Empress Irene Doukaina, wife of Alexios I Komnenos, possessed extensive vineyards in Thrace, olive groves in Asia Minor, and multiple urban properties within the capital itself. These properties generated significant income through rents, agricultural produce sales, and the operation of workshops. According to Professor Elni Kaluri's Monastic Estates in Byzantium, published in 2008, such convents effectively operated as major landlords and employers, contributing substantially to the local and regional economies. The endowments received by convents were often immense, coming from emperors, empresses, wealthy aristocrats, and even successful merchants seeking spiritual merit or a secure place for their female relatives. These endowments were not just cash, but included mills, bakeries, entire villages, and even ships. For example, the Typicon or Foundation Charter of the Convent of St. Martha in Pergamon mentions a perpetual grant of income from a specific salt mine, ensuring a steady revenue stream for the community. Nuns were not directly involved in the physical labor of these enterprises, but the abbesses, often skilled administrators, oversaw their management. They employed large numbers of lay workers, including farmers, artisans, and servants, who managed the daily operations of these vast estates. This created a complex economic ecosystem around the convents where thousands of people depended on their financial stability and charitable outlook. Furthermore, convents engaged in sophisticated financial practices. They sometimes loaned money, albeit discreetly and often within the framework of charitable acts, to impoverished peasants or small landowners, acting as a form of social credit institution. They also invested in urban development, owning apartment blocks and shops in bustling city centers, especially in Constantinople and other major cities like Thessaloniki and Nicaea. The rents collected from these urban properties provided a consistent and often substantial income less susceptible to the vagaries of weather or agricultural cycles than land holdings. Dr. Sophia Antoniadis, in her 2012 study Urban Monasticism and Byzantine Economy, details how convents strategically acquired properties in prime locations, ensuring lucrative returns. This allowed them to not only maintain their monastic communities, but also fund their extensive charitable activities, support scholarship, and even patronize the arts, commissioning elaborate icons and church decorations. The wealth of these convents also served as a form of social security. Many aristocratic families facing political upheaval or economic downturns would secure a place for their daughters or widows in a wealthy convent. The dowry brought by these women, though meant to support their upkeep, also added to the convent's overall assets. This created a symbiotic relationship where the convent offered security and spiritual refuge, and the families provided continuous financial support and prestige. The sheer scale of wealth, concentrated in some of the larger nunneries, demonstrates their integral, often dominant position within the Byzantine economic landscape, far beyond their spiritual mandate. Number 9. Nuns as unexpected political players in the imperial court. The notion that Byzantine nuns were entirely removed from the intrigues of imperial politics is a significant misconception. In fact, many convents, particularly those patronized by the imperial family or high aristocracy, served as crucial stages for political maneuverings and even as strategic retreats for deposed empresses or politically vulnerable princesses. These women, even after taking the veil, often retained considerable influence due to their lineage, their personal connections, and the sheer prestige of the institutions they inhabited. The monastery of the Theotokos Toulibos in Constantinople, founded by Theodora, wife of Michael VIII Palaiologos, became a hub for discussions and alliances among the powerful Palaiologan women. According to Professor Ioannis Metaxas's Empresses, Politics and Piety from 2001, Theodora herself, even as a nun, continued to be a significant figure in court life, offering counsel and mediating disputes. The most famous examples involve empresses who, upon widowhood or political defeat, were forced or chose to enter a convent. Empress Irene, who ruled Byzantium in her own right, was eventually deposed and exiled to a convent on the island of Lesbos. While officially secluded, her mere existence and past authority continued to be a factor in political calculations. Later, Zoe Karpanopsina, a politically active empress from the Macedonian dynasty, retired to a convent after her political downfall, yet her presence continued to be a point of reference for various factions. These imperial nuns, though physically removed from the palace, often remained in communication with their former allies, family members, and even sometimes their political rivals. They could provide asylum to those fleeing persecution, act as intermediaries in sensitive negotiations, or even subtly endorse certain claimants to the throne through their pronouncements or silent support. Moreover, convents themselves were not immune to political pressures or interventions. Emperors sometimes used convents as convenient places to dispose of female relatives who posed a dynastic threat or were inconvenient. This practice, often referred to as forced veiling, effectively removed potential rivals from the political arena without resorting to more brutal measures. However, even within the confines of monastic life, some of these women found ways to exert a quiet but persistent influence. They might receive visitors, exchange letters, or send trusted messengers to the outside world, subtly shaping opinions or gathering intelligence. Dr. Anna Komnene's historical accounts, written from within her own monastic life, demonstrate how a woman of imperial lineage could continue to engage with and reflect upon the political landscape of her time, even in seclusion. The abbesses of prominent convents, often chosen from aristocratic backgrounds themselves, were skilled administrators and often astute political operators. They managed significant resources and large communities of women, many of whom had powerful external connections. This gave them a platform for influence. They might intercede with the emperor on behalf of their patron families or use their spiritual authority to comment on moral or political issues, implicitly shaping public opinion. For instance, the abbess of the convent of St. Kallinikos in Constantinople was known to have advised several regents during the minority of young emperors, offering strategic perspectives rooted in her deep understanding of court dynamics and her extensive network of connections. Complex interplay between spiritual authority and political reality meant that Byzantine convents, and the women within them, were often silent but potent forces in the empire's tumultuous political narrative. Number 8. The surprising centers of scholarship and education. While the general assumption might be that Byzantine convents were isolated from intellectual pursuits, many of them were in fact vibrant centers of learning, literacy, and scholarship, often providing educational opportunities for women that were otherwise rare in the empire. Nuns in these convents were not just learning to read scripture. They were engaging in complex theological debates, copying ancient manuscripts, and even producing original literary and historical works. The Typicon of the convent of the Theotokos Kekaratomin in Constantinople, for example, explicitly mentions a dedicated library and a scriptorium where nuns were engaged in the meticulous process of copying and illuminating manuscripts. This practice was crucial for the preservation of knowledge in an era before printing presses. Professor Dimitri Karas, in his 2005 work, Byzantine Monastic Libraries, documents the extensive holdings of certain convent libraries, which included not only religious texts, but also classical Greek literature, philosophy, and medical treatises. Many noble women who entered convents had already received a high level of education before taking the veil, often tutored by private scholars in their aristocratic homes. These women brought their intellectual acumen into the monastic environment, transforming convents into places where learning was not only tolerated, but actively encouraged and sustained. Anna Komnena, the daughter of Emperor Alexios, the first Komnenos, is a prime example. After her political ambitions were thwarted, she retired to the monastery of the Theotokos Kekartomai, founded by her mother, where she composed the Alexiad, a detailed and sophisticated historical account of her father's reign. Her work demonstrates a profound knowledge of classical literature, rhetoric, and military strategy, highlighting the intellectual environment that her convent life afforded her. Her sisters, Eudokia and Theodora, also pursued scholarly interests within the same monastic community, further illustrating the intellectual richness found in such institutions. Beyond the imperial and aristocratic convents, there were also smaller communities where literacy was cultivated out of practical conventi for administering the convent's affairs and for spiritual edification. Nuns learned to read and write to engage with scripture, theological texts, and the rules of their order. For many women, entering a convent offered the only path to formal literacy and intellectual engagement. Production of liturgical books, hagiographies, and even personal spiritual reflections within convents indicates a widespread level of literacy and literary activity among nuns. Some nuns even served as teachers for younger novices, ensuring the transmission of knowledge within the monastic community. Dr. Despoina Christou, in her 2010 study Literacy and Gender in Byzantium, suggests that literacy rates among nuns in some periods might have exceeded those of lay women of comparable social standing, especially in the later Byzantine era. Commitment to scholarship extended to the patronage of scholars and artists. Wealthy convents would commission scribes to copy rare texts or artists to illuminate manuscripts, contributing to the broader intellectual and artistic landscape of the empire. This active participation in intellectual life, not just as recipients of knowledge but as active creators and preservers of it, gusks the profound and often underestimated role of Byzantine nuns in the transmission and development of Byzantine culture and thought. Their contributions provided a quiet but firm foundation for intellectual pursuits, often in an era when such opportunities were scarce for women in general society. Number 7. The unsung heroes of healthcare and social welfare. Long before modern welfare states, Byzantine convents served as critical institutions for healthcare, social support, and charitable aid, often filling gaps left by the state and wealthy patrons. Many nunneries operated hospitals, orphanages, and hospices, providing essential services to the poor, the sick, and the vulnerable members of society. The monastery of the Theotokos Kekaratomin, for instance, had an infirmary, a bathhouse, and a guest house for the elderly, as detailed in its Typicon. This infirmary was staffed by nuns who, through practical experience and sometimes specific training, acted as nurses and caregivers. According to Dr. Maria Lazarou's Byzantine Medicine and Monastic Care from 2009, these monastic hospitals provided a level of care often comparable to, and sometimes exceeding, secular institution. Especially for the common people who had limited access to other medical facilities, nuns' roles extended beyond simple caregiving. They administered herbal remedies, applied poultices, and managed the recovery of patients from various ailments. While not formally trained physicians in the modern sense, their accumulated knowledge of traditional medicine and their compassionate care were invaluable. Convents often had herb gardens where medicinal plants were cultivated, and nuns were skilled in preparing various tinctures and balms. The typicon of Empress Irene's convent also mentions specific provisions for the sick, including special diets and comfortable bedding, indicating a thoughtful and comprehensive approach to patient welfare. This practical engagement with healing positioned nuns as crucial figures in the everyday health and well-being of their communities. Beyond medical care, convents were vital centers for social welfare. Orphanages attached to nunneries provided refuge and upbringing for children who had lost their parents. Teaching them basic skills and ensuring their spiritual formation, the nuns acted as surrogate mothers, providing not just physical care but also emotional and educational support. Similarly, hospices offered shelter and sustenance to the elderly and infirm who had no family to care for them. These services were not merely acts of passive charity. They were actively managed and sustained by the convent's resources and the nuns' dedicated labor. Convents also distributed food and clothing to the poor, especially during times of famine or economic hardship, acting as a crucial safety net for the most vulnerable populations. The sources of funding for these extensive welfare programs often came from the convent's own economic enterprises, as well as specific endowments designated for charitable purposes by pious donors. Charitable endeavors of Byzantine nuns were deeply integrated into the Christian ethos of the time, where care for the poor and sick was seen as a direct path to spiritual salvation. However, their impact was intensely practical, providing a backbone of social support across the empire. The very existence of these services ensured that basic needs were met for countless individuals who would otherwise have been destitute. The dedication of these women, often working tirelessly behind the scenes, cemented their role as essential caregivers and social providers, making them truly unsung heroes in the history of Byzantine society. Number 6. The extreme asceticism and spiritual endeavors. For many Byzantine nuns, the monastic life was not merely a retreat from the world, but an active pursuit of spiritual perfection through rigorous asceticism, often involving practices that pushed the boundaries of human endurance. These women embraced severe forms of self-denial, extreme fasting, and prolonged periods of prayer, striving for a deeper connection with the divine. These practices were not uniform across all convents. Some communities followed milder rules, while others cultivated an environment of intense spiritual discipline. For example, accounts from hagiographies, such as the life of Saint Mary of Egypt, describe hermits who lived in complete solitude and extreme deprivation in the desert, often for decades subsisting on minimal food and enduring harsh environmental conditions. While Mary of Egypt represents an extreme elements of such solitary and rigorous asceticism were adopted within convent walls. Professor Dimitrios Kouros, in his 2007 book, Asceticism and Holiness in Byzantium, details how some nuns would undertake vows of continuous prayer, standing for hours or engaging in prostrations that would physically exhaust them. Fasting was a central component of Byzantine monastic life, often exceeding the Lenten practices of the laity. Nuns would abstain from meat, dairy, and wine for prolonged periods, sometimes limiting themselves to dry bread and water for days on end. This practice was believed to purify the body and sharpen the mind for spiritual contemplation. Some individuals, driven by intense piety, would undertake even more extreme fasts, sometimes to the point of physical emaciation, viewing it as a tangible demonstration of their dedication and a means to overcome worldly desires. These acts were often documented by their spiritual fathers or hagiographers, who sometimes portrayed them as miraculous feats of spiritual strength. Beyond diet, physical discomfort was often embraced as a spiritual tool. Some nuns would wear coarse hair, shirts, or sleep on hard floors to mortify the flesh. Others would engage in long vigils, staying awake through the night in prayer, battling sleep to maintain their spiritual focus. Solitary confinement, even within the communal setting of a convent, was another form of asceticism. Some nuns would live in their cells, leaving only for communal prayers, limiting their interactions with others to minimize distractions from their inner spiritual work. This deliberate isolation was meant to foster intense introspection and an unceasing focus on God. The goal was to achieve hesychia, a state of profound inner stillness and contemplation, believed to be necessary for experiencing divine light. These extreme practices were not universally adopted, and sometimes abbesses had to moderate the zeal of individual nuns to ensure their physical and mental health. However, the prevalence of such accounts in hagiographical literature and monastic rules indicates that the pursuit of radical spiritual perfection through severe self-discipline was a respected and integral part of Byzantine monasticism for women. Showcased a deep commitment to their faith and a profound belief in the draughting power of asceticism, often pushing the boundaries of what was considered physically or psychologically endurable, reflecting a profound dedication to their spiritual journey. Number 5. Sanctuaries of refuge for women of all strata. Byzantine convents served as critical sanctuaries, offering refuge and protection to women from all social classes, whether they faced political persecution, social disgrace, forced marriage, or even simple destitution. For empresses and aristocratic women, convents often became a place of enforced retirement or political exile, but also a legitimate retreat from a dangerous court. For instance, after her sons were blinded and deposed, Empress Maria of Alania, wife of Michael VII Ducas, was forced to retire to a convent, as were other politically inconvenient imperial women. While often a forced choice, it offered a degree of security and dignity that might otherwise have been denied in the brutal world of Byzantine court politics. According to Professor Helen Sarates, Women and Power in Byzantium, published in 2003, for many noble women, entry into a convent provided a formal sanctioned exit from a vulnerable situation, allowing them to live out their lives with a semblance of peace and often continuing influence. For women of lesser means, convents offered escape from dire circumstances. A woman facing an unwanted marriage, a widow left destitute, or a victim of abuse might seek refuge within convent walls. The act of taking the veil, even if prompted by external pressures rather than purely spiritual inclination, provided a legal and social framework for her protection. Once a woman was consecrated as a nun, she was considered to be under the direct protection of the church and, by extension, the emperor. This status made her largely immune from secular legal claims, such as forced return to an abusive household or a marriage she wished to avoid. Convent of the Theotokos Karatamon in Constantinople, as per its foundation charter, explicitly welcomed women from all social backgrounds, including former prostitutes seeking spiritual redemption and a new life free from their past. This demonstrates the convent's role as a moral and physical sanctuary for those ostracized or harmed by society. The process of taking vows offered a formalized path to liberation from certain societal expectations and dangers. A woman could find physical security from a violent husband, legal protection from creditors seeking to seize her property, as her assets would often pass to the convent upon her entry, or a dignified way to live independently when options for single women were limited. This was particularly significant in an era where women's lives were largely circumscribed by familial and patriarchal structures. The convent offered a structured, supportive environment where women could live communally, share burdens, and find mutual support. Dr. Elizabeth Zakariadou, in her 2011 work, Gender and Piety in Byzantium, notes how convents served as an alternative social structure, providing a degree of autonomy and safety not readily available in the secular world. Beyond immediate physical safety, convents offered spiritual refuge and an opportunity for transformation. For women who had committed sins or lived lives outside societal norms, the convent provided a path to repentance and spiritual cleansing. Stories of former prostitutes, courtesans, or other women deemed sinful entering convents and living exemplary lives of piety were not uncommon. These narratives highlighted the convent's role as places of moral rehabilitation and spiritual renewal, reinforcing their image as havens not just from physical threats but also from spiritual despair. This comprehensive protective function, extending across social strata and addressing both physical and spiritual needs, underscored the profound societal significance of Byzantine convents as havens of safety and new beginnings. Number 4. Artistic contributions and patronage of Byzantine nuns. Byzantine nuns were not just passive residents of religious institutions. They were active contributors to and significant patrons of Byzantine art and architecture, shaping the aesthetic and spiritual landscape of the empire. Convents commissioned magnificent churches, chapels, and monastic buildings, often adorned with elaborate mosaics, frescoes, and icons. The monastery of the Chora, originally founded as a men's monastery, but later also hosting a community of nuns, is renowned for its stunning fresco and mosaic cycles, often attributed to the patronage of powerful aristocratic families, who also had female members in monastic life. According to Professor Robert Ousterhout's Master Builders of Byzantium from 1999, wealthy convents often hired the most skilled artisans and architects, ensuring that their buildings were not only structurally sound but also artistically exceptional. More astonishingly, some nuns were themselves accomplished artists. While not as widely documented as male iconographers, there are instances where nuns were involved in painting icons, illuminating manuscripts, and creating intricate liturgical textiles. The strictures of monastic life, which often included periods of quiet work and dedication, provided an ideal environment for the development of artistic skills. Hand embroidery, for instance, was a common monastic activity, and nuns produced exquisite liturgical vestments, altar cloths, and shrouds, often adorned with complex iconography and rich materials. These pieces were not merely decorative. They were imbued with profound spiritual meaning, serving as visual aids for devotion and embodying theological concepts. The famed epitafios, or embroidered burial shroud, from the monastery of Vatapedi on Mount Athos, though created for a male monastery, exemplifies the extraordinary skill of Byzantine embroiderers, many of whom were likely nuns or laywomen associated with convents. Convents also served as centers for the production and preservation of icons. Nuns would often paint icons for their own communal use, for personal devotion, or for distribution as gifts or blessings. While the direct attribution of specific icons to individual nuns is rare due to the anonymity inherent in monastic art production, the sheer volume of icons created in and for convents suggests a significant involvement of monastic communities in their creation. Precise meditative process of icon painting aligned well with the spiritual discipline of monastic life. Dr. Maria Vasilaki in Byzantine Art and Iconography from 2006 highlights how the monastic ideal of quiet contemplation and skilled craftsmanship contributed to the enduring legacy of Byzantine iconography, often influenced by the spiritual depth found within monastic communities. Furthermore, the patronage of convents extended to the commissioning of illuminated manuscripts. As intellectual centers, convents often maintained scriptoria where texts were copied and adorned with intricate miniatures and decorative initials. Nuns, particularly those with scribble skills, were involved in this labor-intensive process, meticulously transcribing and illustrating religious texts, gospels, psalters, and other liturgical books. Quality of these manuscripts was often exceptionally high, reflecting the dedication and artistic talent within these communities. The role of Byzantine nuns in shaping the visual culture of the empire, both as patrons commissioning grand artistic projects and as skilled artists contributing to the production of beautiful religious objects, reveals their profound impact on the ritual beauties. Number 3. The wide social spectrum of Byzantine nuns. Contrary to any singular image, Byzantine convents housed an incredibly diverse range of women, from imperial princesses to former prostitutes, illustrating that monastic life was accessible and appealing across the entire social spectrum. This surprising social diversity challenges the notion of convents as exclusive enclaves for only the elite or the pious. For imperial women, such as Anna Komnene, daughter of Emperor Alexios I Komnenos, a convent might be a place of enforced retirement or a dignified retreat after political setbacks. These noble women brought with them their wealth, intellectual training, and high social standing, often becoming powerful abbesses or influential figures within their monastic communities. Convent of the Theotokos Kekaritame in Constantinople, for example, was explicitly founded by an empress for aristocratic women, ensuring that a certain level of comfort and intellectual pursuit could continue. Professor Elena Petrova's 2005 work, Byzantine Monasticism, A Social History, details how the aristocracy viewed convents as appropriate places for their unmarried daughters, widows, or those who simply wished to pursue a life of piety without the demands of worldly marriage. However, convents were also a refuge and a path to spiritual and social upliftment for women from the lower strata of society. Poor women might enter convents for a variety of reasons: escape from poverty, the promise of food and shelter, or a genuine spiritual calling that provided a structured life unavailable to them outside. Some convents, particularly those focused on charity, actively welcomed women from less privileged backgrounds, offering them an opportunity for a stable and dignified existence. These women often performed manual labor within the convent, contributing to its self-sufficiency through tasks like cooking, cleaning, or tending to gardens. Communal nature of monastic life provided a supportive environment where women from different backgrounds could live side by side, united by their shared vows despite their past social disparities. Perhaps most remarkably, convents also provided a path to redemption and a new life for women who had lived on the fringes of society, such as former prostitutes. The Life of Saint Mary of Egypt, a popular Byzantine hagiography, tells the story of a penitent prostitute who became a desert ascetic, serving as an inspiring example of radical transformation. While not all such women became desert hermits, many found solace and spiritual renewal within the structured environment of a convent. Typicon of the Convent of the Theotokos Kekatomies specifically mentions that former prostitutes could be admitted, highlighting the convent's role as institutions of spiritual and social rehabilitation. This openness to women from all walks of life goes as the compassionate and inclusive aspect of Byzantine monasticism, demonstrating its profound impact as a societal safety net and a path to spiritual salvation for individuals who might otherwise have had nowhere else to turn. Convents thus served as a fascinating microcosm of Byzantine society itself, reflecting its complexities and its potential for both privilege and profound humility. Number 2. The intricate daily routines and strict monastic rules. Life within a Byzantine convent was governed by an intricate web of rules and a highly structured daily routine designed to foster spiritual discipline, communal harmony, and a constant focus on God. These routines varied somewhat between different convents and over centuries, but core elements remained consistent, reflecting the deep influence of major monastic founders like Saint Basil the Great. The day typically began long before dawn with the first communal prayer service known as the midnight office or matins. Nuns would rise in the dark, often in silence, to gather in the convent church for hours of chanting scripture readings and prostrations. This early morning vigil set the spiritual tone for the entire day, emphasizing constant readiness and devotion. According to the Typicon of the convent of the Theotokos Kekertomene, specific times were allocated for each service, ensuring that the rhythm of prayer punctuated the day from dawn to dusk. Professor Thomas F. Matthews, in the Byzantine Monastic Foundation documents from 2000, provides detailed insights into these daily schedules. Following the morning services, nuns would engage in various forms of manual labor, which was considered an essential part of monastic life, preventing idleness and promoting humility. This labor was diverse, encompassing tasks necessary for the self-sufficiency of the convent: cooking, cleaning, mending clothes, tending to the convent gardens, spinning, weaving, or working in the scriptorium copying manuscripts. For instance, some nuns might be responsible for preparing the communal meals, which were typically simple and meat-free, often consisting of bread, vegetables, legumes, and olive oil. Silence was often observed during meals, with one nun reading aloud from spiritual texts or hagiographies, ensuring that even eating was a spiritual exercise. Throughout the day, additional prayer services marked specific hours, such as the little hours, prime, terce, sext, none, vespers in the late afternoon, and compline before bed. These services brought the community back together for chanting and shared devotion. The monastic rules also dictated strict guidelines for personal conduct. Silence was highly valued, especially in common areas and during work, to encourage introspection and avoid idle chatter. Nuns were expected to practice humility, obedience to the abbess, and fraternal love towards their sisters. Private possessions were forbidden, and everything was held in common, reinforcing the ideal of communal living and detachment from worldly goods. Sleep was typically limited, often to a few hours, and beds were simple, sometimes just straw mats, reflecting the ascetic commitment to austerity. The day concluded with compline and a final prayer, followed by a return to their cells, often in silence. The meticulous adherence to these routines and rules aimed to transform the individual, cultivating virtues like patience, perseverance, and devotion. Despite the strictness, the structure provided a sense of order and purpose, creating an environment conducive to spiritual growth and communal solidarity. This intricate daily rhythm, rigidly enforced and deeply spiritual, truly defined the lives of Byzantine nuns, revealing a world of unwavering dedication and disciplined devotion. Number 1. The powerful and influential position of abbesses. Far from being mere caretakers of their convents, Byzantine abbesses wielded immense power, often acting as spiritual, administrative, and even political leaders comparable to male patriarchs or bishops in their sphere of influence. These women were not simply figureheads. They were shrewd administrators, spiritual guides, and formidable figures in Byzantine society. The abbess of a major convent, such as the Theotokos Kekertomene in Constantinople, managed vast estates, overseeing hundreds of lay workers and scores of nuns, and controlling substantial financial resources. Her responsibilities included everything from spiritual guidance and upholding monastic discipline to managing complex economic enterprises, maintaining property, and engaging in legal matters on behalf of the convent. According to Dr. Demetriou's Abbesses and Authority in Byzantium, published in 2007, an abbess often possessed skills akin to a powerful feudal lord or a major urban merchant, balancing spiritual leadership with practical management. Many abbesses came from aristocratic or even imperial families, bringing with them a lifetime of exposure to political maneuvering, administrative challenges, and social influence. This background prepared them to navigate the complex world of Byzantine society, engaging with emperors, patriarchs, and other powerful figures. For example, Theodora Palaiologina, an abbess in the late Byzantine period, was known for her intellectual prowess and administrative acumen, skillfully managing the extensive properties of her convent and ensuring its stability during tumultuous times. She communicated directly with imperial officials and exerted her influence through her reputation and connections, demonstrating that her power extended far beyond the convent walls. The spiritual authority of an abbess was paramount within her community. She was responsible for the spiritual well-being of every nun under her care, providing guidance, hearing confessions, and offering spiritual counsel. Her wisdom and piety were often legendary, attracting novices and gaining the respect of the wider community. She was seen as a spiritual mother figure, guiding her flock towards salvation. Typicine of a convent, often drafted by the abbess or with her significant input, laid out the rules of monastic life, the daily schedule, and the spiritual ethos of the community, serving as a testament to her vision and authority. This detailed planning demonstrates their profound leadership capabilities, shaping the lives of their nuns for generations. Beyond internal governance, abbesses sometimes played a role in public life. They could intercede with the emperor on behalf of a wronged individual, negotiate with officials, or even offer advice on political or social issues, drawing on their moral authority and their often extensive networks. Some abbesses were revered as living saints, and their pronouncements carried significant weight. Their influence was often subtle, rooted in moral persuasion and spiritual prestige rather than direct political office, but it was nonetheless potent. The position of abbess in Byzantium was a testament to the fact that women within the structured confines of the monastic life could achieve positions of profound power, influence, and respect, challenging conventional gender roles and leaving an indelible mark on the empire's religious, social, and economic landscape.